Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to our webinar, What is Health Screening? So my name is Hannah. I'm one of the health and wellness experts here at ToHealth, and ToHealth is part of PAM Group, which hopefully you're all familiar with. So I guess some just housekeeping from today. We've put a message into the chat box. So if you have a look in the Q&A box, you'll have a see on how we are running today's session. So please do go and have a quick look at that. And just to give you a little bit of background on myself, so I've worked within health screening now for about 9 years, so hopefully I can pass my expertise and my insight on today for this free session. So let's have a quick look at today's agenda. So what we're going to be covering is we'll start with what actually is health screening, and within that I'm also going to touch on what it isn't, because I think sometimes there are some confusion and some barriers that come up. We're going to look at what's actually included in a health screening. We're going to touch on 5 of the main markers that we should be aware of, and then we'll finish up the session with how just even a 20-minute session could change the way that we approach our day-to-day life. So the reason that we're all here is looking at, well, what is health screening? So health screening is a test or a group of tests that we can perform on asymptomatic individuals. And what that can do is assess their likelihood of whether they're going to potentially have a particular disease. So in the case of corporate wellbeing, which is where we do a lot of our health screening, what we're going to do is we can deliver a set of tests on employees at a workplace, and we can help them to keep better track of their health, and we can help them to reduce their risk of certain lifestyle diseases. Now, health screening can include lots of different measures. So it can be things like blood pressure, it can be cholesterol, blood glucose. We can also look at things like our body composition. Now, depending on different packages chosen and how much support you're looking at, health screening can also include things like fitness testing. We can cover mental wellbeing support, cancer tests. There's lots of other further comprehensive blood tests as well. And because we're carrying out health screening on symptomless individuals, what it can do is it can help us to detect potential problems much earlier than if we wait for symptoms to come about. So the idea is we can test lots of different people and we can pick up on things before symptoms come, and to help minimize that risk. And the earlier we catch things, the better it is for everything. Now, once a health screening has taken place, what we can do then is we can also pair those results with looking at our lifestyle in a very proactive way. So when we look at our health, we can actually split it into 2 different sides. So we can think about our risk of developing disease, that there are some risk factors that are non-modifiable, but also we've got some that are modifiable. Now, we know that we can't change our age, we can't change our biological sex, our family history, our ethnicity, those things we just can't do anything about. But we can change our lifestyle. So things like how much exercise we do, what food we eat, things like whether we're smoking, whether we're drinking excess alcohol. When we have a health screening, what it can do is it can help us to explore all of those modifiable risk factors and look at what we should be doing, what we're actually doing, and how they compare. And in order from that, what we can do is we can look at setting ourselves personal goals to work towards. Now, I mentioned at the start, when we're looking at what health screening is, one thing I just want to, highlight is to also look at what health screening isn't. Now, often I think sometimes it can be confused with things like a safety critical medical or a fit to work medical. Having a health screen has nothing to do with whether you're fit to do your job, nor does it fall under any other part of occupational health. So when we do a health screening, the screening is for the individual. The results for that individual would never ever be passed back to line managers or to companies. So from my experience of working with lots of different populations, I feel that sometimes that is a misunderstanding and it can put up a barrier for engagement. So sometimes employees may miss the opportunity to take that proactive approach to their health because they're worried it's going to be passed back. So it's really important to know that health screening is separate from that. So it's for the individual, it's all there for a client-centered personal approach. It's very much not for companies. Having said that though, health screening is not just for individuals, it's also good for businesses as well. So there was the Britain's Healthiest Workplace survey, and they showed us that absenteeism and presenteeism is costing the UK economy over £70 billion per year. And employees are losing the equivalent of 38 days of productive time each year. That's a huge cost to businesses. We're also told that a strong correlation between lifestyle choices and that the employees can make, and the correlation will be with their physical health, their mental health, and how they perform at work. So if we think about workplace health and wellbeing programs, if we can invest time and resources into supporting colleagues and their physical health and their mental health, and health screening being a huge part of that and supporting colleagues, what it can do is it can help us to improve their performance at work. If we remove the barrier of affordability, which often as individuals they may not be able to afford to go and pay for this health screening themselves, individuals are more likely to be able to make changes, and then the benefits are going to be there for everyone. A happier and a healthier workforce is going to result in more productive staff. It's going to result in better engagement, lower staff turnover and recruitment costs. If we think about the knowledge that individuals have, we want to retain that knowledge, so there's going to be much greater knowledge retention. You can see on the slides as well, there's a little bit of feedback from an employee that we screened. Now, we know that there is an increase in demand on our NHS, and we know that it's very difficult to see doctors. So health screening can provide the opportunity for peace of mind and for education and some time for individuals to discuss how they can look after their health when potentially they may struggle to do that elsewhere. Now, when we know, or if we think about employee health, it's not yet a legal requirement for health and wellbeing to be looked after. However, when we look at the guidance from NICE say that it should actually be a central priority. I went back to central London yesterday for the first time in a while, and even more so, it made me realise that we are returning to that fast-paced pre-lockdown world. Commutes are definitely back. That tube could not fit me in. The demand for work is very, very high, and stress levels are getting even higher. Anyone on this call today as an employer or who works within wellbeing, works within HR, have a little think about, as a business, is there anything that you could do to help? And potentially health screening could be that thing that could help. Now, there are lots of different tests that can be done as part of a health assessment, and here at ToHealth we have 5 different main levels. So they start at our 20-minute MOT, and within an MOT we would look at things like cholesterol, we would look for diabetes, and we would look at body composition. We would also look at blood pressure. Now, that MOT is our kind of shortest level of assessment, but they then work their way up all the way through to our executive. And when we get up to our executive, we're going to have things in there, including full blood analysis, we're going to have fitness testing, we're going to have heart rhythm checks and more. All of our assessments can be completed either on site at your workplaces, they can be completed in one of our clinics, and we can also deliver health assessments remotely. So there would always be something that would fit your requirements, and for every individual requirement as well. Now, my favourite way of looking at health screening is we can look in the mirror and we can look at our appearance, but what we can't do is we can't look on the inside and see how healthy we are. So as we said, even just having a 20-minute health screening, and we can look that bit deeper, and we can see some really key measures and we can act accordingly. So what we want to do today is to spend a few minutes just exploring those key measures that we can look at. So let's start with blood pressure. So blood pressure refers to how much our blood is pushing on the inside walls of our blood vessels. Now, we need some pushing because that blood needs to make it round, but too much pushing can lead to extra strain on our blood vessels, on our heart and our other organs. So for example, our eyes and our kidneys. If we have persistent high blood pressure, that therefore increases our risk of serious and potentially life-threatening health conditions. So it could be things like heart attacks or heart disease. If we have high blood pressure, it can also cause the arteries and the blood supply of an oxygen to our brain to either burst or become blocked, and that could cause a stroke. Now, I'm sure we've all heard of the numbers. So 120, 80 is numbers that we constantly, I guess, tend to hear. But what that is what's considered to be a normal blood pressure reading. So anything that's less than 120 systolic, and that's the when our heart contracts and there's a lot of pushing, over anything less than 80 on the diastolic, and that's in between beats when the heart is relaxing, that is what we're looking for. And you can see the numbers on the slide there for the different ranges. Now, one of the things about high blood pressure is it often has no symptoms or no warning signs. It's why it gets that nickname, the silent killer. So this means lots of people can have high blood pressure without even realizing that they do. So they're putting themselves at risk with absolutely no idea that's what they're doing. Now, throughout my years of delivering health screening, there has been countless times where I've gone into a workplace, I've measured someone's blood pressure, and it's come back as either high or very, very high. Those individuals, we've referred to their GP, and in some instances, we've actually had to send people to A&E off the back of their blood pressure. They've then been able to receive the care that they need, and they're able to get their blood pressure back under control. And again, in some cases, especially those A&E trip ones that we do send people to, people do end up often on medication for their blood pressure. What I then love is that I get to go back to those workplaces the following year, and we see those individuals, same again, and suddenly they're potentially on medication, their blood pressure is back under control. The feedback we get from these individuals is they're always so grateful that we've come to site, otherwise they just never would have gotten around to having their blood pressure checked, and potentially something could have happened, and they could have been very unwell from that underlying blood pressure that they just didn't know about. So blood pressure is a really great measure that we can pick up within these health screenings. Another one is blood glucose. So blood glucose, or also known as glycemia, is the measure of how concentrated the sugar is in our blood. And the word glucose actually comes from the Greek word for sweet, which I find quite interesting. Now, we get sugar from the food that we eat and from the drinks that we drink, and it's completely normal for our blood sugar levels to be fluctuating throughout the day. And we need sugar, don't we? We need energy, and sugar is going to be our energy source. Everything that we do is going to require some sort of energy. Our bodies are therefore designed to try and keep our blood glucose levels nice and constant. Now, when we eat, our blood sugar level will rise. What our pancreas does is it's going to release insulin. Insulin is a hormone, and its job is to remove the sugar from our blood into our cells for energy and for storage. If we don't then eat for a few hours, we're very busy at work, we're doing everything that we need to do, our glucose levels are going to start to drop. And what's going to happen then is we're going to stop releasing insulin, and instead we're going to start releasing glucagon. And what that's going to do is it's going to say to our livers, please take the stored glycogen and turn it into glucose to make our glucose levels go back up. So it's I guess the best way you can think about it is similar like a thermostat or like a game, and our body is constantly monitoring that sugar level, and every time it goes high or low, it's going to change its action in order to constantly maintain that normal blood glucose levels. Now, people with diabetes will have higher than normal glucose levels in their blood, and that's either because they don't have enough insulin to move it into our cells, or the cells don't respond as well as they should. If we have high levels of glucose, if we don't act upon that, then what that can do is it can start causing damage to our bodies. So think about things like our kidneys and our eyes and our other organs. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we are maintaining those glucose levels. Now, if we have our glucose levels measured, it's a great way for peace of mind to check that, yeah, the glucose levels are being maintained. Or it could start us to help pick up on pre-diabetes or even diabetes. So especially people who are at higher risk of diabetes due to things like family history or other factors, it's really handy to come and get our blood glucose levels checked. Now, while we're measuring blood glucose, we can also measure our blood cholesterol level. Now, cholesterol, think of it, well, it's a chemical building block, and we find cholesterol naturally in our cells. Personally, I always find things as a very visual, I'm a very visual learner. So when I think about cholesterol, I imagine it to be lots of little Lego blocks in our body, and our body will put them together to make whatever it needs. And I find, especially over the last, I guess, 10 years, cholesterol is always given really bad press. But actually, we need it. We need cholesterol to make new cells, to make hormones, to make bile. Without cholesterol, we're not going to be able to digest our food. So we have to have it. Now, cholesterol is carried around our body on our lipoproteins, and our lipoproteins are split into high density and low density. Now, low density lipoproteins, also known as the bad guys, low density lipoprotein carries cholesterol to the cells that need it, but when there's too much of it, that's what starts building up on our artery walls. And LDL can cause our blood vessels to become narrow, and it can cause them to become blocked. And what that can do is it can lead to things like heart attacks and strokes. High density lipoprotein, on the other hand, though, is known as the good cholesterol. And what it does is it carries the excess cholesterol away from the cells and back to the liver. When it gets to the liver, it's going to be either broken down or it's going to be passed out of the body as a waste product. So the higher the good levels, or higher the HDL, higher the good cholesterol, the better. Cholesterol comes from two different sources. So our liver makes all of the cholesterol that we need. We then can have additional cholesterol from animal products. So, for example, meat, poultry, dairy products, they can all contain dietary cholesterol. Those same foods, though, can be high in saturated fat and trans fat. And it's the excess consumption of saturated fat and trans fat that's going to cause our livers to make more cholesterol than we otherwise would need. So for some people, this added production, because of dietary factors, what it can do is it can cause us to make too much cholesterol, and we end up with an unhealthy cholesterol level, which then is going to lead to heart attacks, to strokes, to atherosclerosis. So by measuring our cholesterol levels, and it's really important to measure both how much we have, but also how much of that is then good, and then everything else we can consider to be bad. So what we want to do is we want to look and check, do we have enough good, taking the cholesterol, the excess cholesterol away, so it's not going to build up in our arteries. So when we do the measure, we should always look for the ratio between those two. By measuring it, what it can do is it can give us the opportunity to make changes, and it may be that we don't automatically think that the impact our diet is having on our health, but actually when we come to measure our cholesterol and we go, actually the cholesterol is a little bit high, perhaps we need to make some more changes, that's going to give us the opportunity to make those changes. The final measure we can also look at is our body composition. So in just a 20-minute assessment, we can look at BMI and our waist-hip ratio. So BMI, or body mass index, to give it its official name, is a measure that looks at our height and our weight to find out whether our overall weight is a healthy amount. And the BMI calculation, it divides an adult's weight in kilograms by their height in centimetres squared. So you can see the calculation at the top of the screen. If we have a high BMI, it suggests that we have higher amounts of body fat. Now we know weight by itself isn't the best determinant of our health, absolutely not. But what we do know is that obesity can increase our risk of several debilitating and in some cases deadly diseases. So things like diabetes and heart disease and some cancers as well. And having obesity and having this additional fat, it does it in a variety of different ways. So some are as straightforward as there is additional physical stress from the additional weight. But there are also some that involve more complex changes to things like our hormones and our metabolism that is going to increase that risk. BMI does have its advantages. So it's inexpensive to measure, it's very replicable, and it's also non-invasive, but it also has some limitations. So BMI will not take into consideration our age, our gender, or our ethnicity. It also doesn't consider the relationship we have between our muscle mass and our fat mass. So it's not the best measure. This is where, within a 20-minute check, waist-hip ratio can come in. So waist-hip ratio is going to measure the ratio between our waist circumference and also our hip circumference. So really it looks at how much fat is being stored on our hips, our waist, and also our bums. When we think about body fat, we can think about it as that not all fat is made the same. So when it comes to risk factors, we know from looking at the research, if we carry more fat around our midsection, so like an apple shape or a beer belly shape, that's going to make our risk of heart disease higher, our risk of type 2 diabetes, and also potentially premature death, compared to those people that carry more of their weight around their hips, around their thighs. Even if our BMI is within a moderate range, we can still have an increased risk of those disease because we carry all of our fat in the wrong place. So we carry it all centrally. Now, there was a study done in 2020, and they showed that even by decreasing our waist-hip ratio by 5%, it can significantly lower our risk of developing chronic kidney disease. And we can also know that there's so many different determinants of our body composition. So on a 20-minute assessment, we can look at BMI and we can look at waist hip. If we have more time, we can then go into looking at things like bioelectrical impedance, and we can look exactly how much is fat, how much is muscle, how much is bone as well. So if we pull all of this together and we think about an employee journey, we can pull together those 5 markers. With even high level assessments with more time, we can pull together even more markers, and then as a result of that we can interlink them together. So I like to think about these things like a domino effect. So our blood pressure, our blood cholesterol, our blood sugar levels, our body composition, they can all increase our risk of disease, and the same ones. So I think about it a little bit like a snowball to poor health. So we can take those results, we can also consider lifestyle factors as well. So it could be whether you're smoking, it could be your diet, it could be that you drink more alcohol units than's recommended. We might be inactive as well. So health screening gives us the opportunity to pull together all of those results, pull together what we are doing with our lifestyle, and we can start looking at how they interlink and what affects what. Is not doing enough exercise having a knock-on effect to your weight, to your blood pressure, to your cholesterol? Sometimes all it can take is some very simple changes, and that can help to reduce the risk. We're going to feel much healthier, we're going to feel much happier. So at a health screening, all of our results are explained in detail and education is given as well. And that's when behaviour change also comes into it. So I'm not sure if you remember as a child, and this very much rings true to me, I could want to do something, but as soon as my mum told me to do that exact same thing, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing it. As soon as she asked me to do it, it was very much I put my defences up. So I know I'm very, very guilty of this. So when it comes to making changes, we can apply the same logic to individuals. We know when we look at research and we look at the behaviour change models that for us to make a change, we need to want to change for ourselves. We are far more likely to make changes if the drive and the motivation comes from within us. So as a result of that, during our health screenings, what we will do is we will use those behaviour change techniques, so things like motivational interviewing and SMART goal setting, and our health and wellness experts will use that to help you to decide on your own next steps. So from the appointment, we can go away with our full reports, we'll go away with our recommendations and with our referrals, but the individual will also go away with what they want to do for their next step. As I discussed earlier as well, there is also benefits to employees. So while we would never ever report back individual results for different people, what we can do is we can provide management insight reports where there's enough data. And what this data allows companies to do is to look at the overall health and well-being of their employees, and it means they can be very proactive in prioritising any further investment that they should need. The best way I like to think about this is it could be that little to none of a workforce could smoke, so there would be absolutely no point investing in a stop smoking service because there would be very little to no benefit. But instead, from this management insight, we might be able to highlight that employees are not meeting the recommendations for exercise, or they're not eating their 5 a day of their fruit and veg. So therefore, channeling into that area and that support shows that we can be much more worthwhile. This insight and this feedback also gives us the opportunity to provide you with feedback from employees. So if anyone gives us any personal feedback for how the company is doing and how much they are grateful for what a company is doing, then we absolutely can feed that back. And where possible, we can also look at tracking company data as well. So very much that was a whistle-stop tour into health screening, because we are surely about to run out of time. So hopefully you found that valuable, and thank you so much for joining me. We've actually just started a new Trustpilot page, so if you've enjoyed the session, please do leave us some feedback. You can either scan the QR code that is on the screen here, or the link has been put into the Q&A box. And if anyone has any questions at all about the session, please do pop them in the Q&A box, because we would love to hear from you and yeah, see how we can help. And then just finally, what I'll leave you with is our socials, so how to get hold of us. So here we have our email address, our website, and also our telephone number, should you wish to contact us in that way. But also please do follow us on our socials as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for the time, and hopefully we will see you soon.